they're bleeding for, like how they're feeling, or just all of it? Like, what would be a red flag? I don't know if that's a little extreme to say, but what would something be that you'd be like, okay, that's kind of a big deal?
Yeah, I mean, so certainly if somebody is having recurring, especially severe symptoms, if it's interfering with your work, with your relationships, with your ability to live your life, that's always something that deserves to be listened to. Aside from that, I think it depends on what you wanna know. Um, because sure, you can get one of those apps and just enter your period in, but you are not going to know anything else about the phases of your cycle from that information. So I would say, like, if you actually want accurate information on the phases of your cycle, on your fertility, on whatever it is, then you've really got to do that foundational work. Certainly, everyone deserves to be listened to regardless, but sometimes we do have to, you know, put that work into ourselves.
Oh yeah, you don't gotta tell me twice. I've had that experience with myself and my son, like trying to advocate and learn your own thing. And it's also hard because doctors and professionals know these words and know these things better than us. So we gotta start at the bottom, and it's kind of a pain in the butt for them to have to explain all this stuff. So I understand, but at the same time, it's like we're we're trying, like we're trying really hard to understand this
Yeah.
stuff. And it's frustrating, I'm sure, but anyways,
Yeah, no,
um
that's a huge problem in the medical community. I think sometimes people forget that others don't know what they know, and I think that sometimes patients and doctors talk to each other and they're maybe even
mhm,
using the same words but mean
mhm,
different things. And so I
exactly.
can completely empathize with that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. What kind of doctors, so you mentioned like an OBGYN, what other doctors would you like connect your clients with? Would it be like an endocrinologist or like another type of professional? I have no idea.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, I'm always going to look for one who has been trained in a fertility awareness method. So that might be an OBGYN, it might be an endocrinologist. There are family nurse practitioners and even general providers that have taken it upon themselves to be trained in this, but unfortunately, they're still a minority. A lot do offer telehealth and things like that. So in most states, I'm able to find someone who's able to see them, which is amazing. So I'm going to look for one that's either FEM trained or NAPRO trained, which are two fertility awareness methods that offer a medical side.
Okay, yeah. So if somebody's looking that up, can you reply or can you repeat what it's called? Trained in
Yes,
what was it?
yes. FEM spelled FEMM or NAPRO spelled NAPRO. That's short for natural procreation. However, again, someone doesn't have to be seeking fertility treatment or struggling with infertility or trying to get pregnant or anything like that, because all of those providers will really view this as an important part of your health, regardless of where you are in that journey.
After somebody has a baby, I'm curious if like does it just usually throw off all your hormones and like you can experience your cycle differently? Like for example, for example, I am having more irregular periods now than I did before. I have PCOS. And also like I feel like my migraines and like maybe my inflammation have changed because I'm not in as much pain as I was. I have chronic pain. So I'm just curious, I guess, if there's like an overarching idea, like something that happens to a lot of women, or if I know it's a very deep question. So whatever you think we could touch on.
Yeah, so we have menstrual cycles for an average of 40 years of our life. And during this time, I like to think about this as the reproductive continuum. So it starts with menarche, which is our first period. As teenagers, it's common for a lot of teens to have irregular cycles, and that is actually not abnormal and does not need to be treated with hormonal birth control. It is considered normal and healthy for it to take up to 2 to 3 years to develop regular cycles as a teen and we're going through kind of our prime reproductive years, then we can have some other changes. One of those could be pregnancy and postpartum. So during pregnancy, of course, you're not having a menstrual cycle, and then you go through some very significant hormonal changes during pregnancy, of course, but after pregnancy. So, within the first 48 hours after giving birth, you experience the most dramatic drop in hormones that you ever will in your entire life. There is no other biological event that compares to what a pregnant woman's hormones go through in those first 48 hours. So, estrogen and progesterone that have been produced in abundance during pregnancy in order to not only support your body, but because they're anabolic hormones, they're steroidal hormones, they're helping your baby grow, are plunging. During the first, especially if a woman is breastfeeding, you're also then producing a hormone called prolactin, which is secreted, when you're nursing, when you're early postpartum, but it continues to be produced if somebody is nursing, breastfeeding, pumping. And it suppresses follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. So that's the hormone that's suppressing a postpartum mother's menstrual cycle. And it takes an incredibly variable amount of time for prolactin to lower and for cycles to return. And it's considered, even when a woman's menstrual cycles begin to return postpartum, it could take, even in a case where there's no hormonal imbalance, up to 6 ovulatory cycles to see any kind of irregularity. And that is considered normal. So here's where I also think this conversation is so important, because our cycles are going to change and there can be changes and irregularities due to medical conditions like PCOS. You gave a great example, thyroid disease, amenorrhea, all different kinds of things like that. But there can also be changes or irregularities that are a natural part of life. Postpartum is a great example of this. And another would be when you're entering perimenopause. We're still having cycles for years typically during that time, but they're different. And so I like to think of this as like our bodies change through so many stages of life, and understanding our menstrual cycles can help us get an idea of what our body is going through during that time. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. It's just weird that some people out here like don't get migraines like when they're pregnant or after, and I still do, but it's just very interesting, and I guess it is so individualized. A lot of these questions are hard to answer for somebody who isn't, doesn't have all the information in front of them. So I kind of wanted to switch gears a little bit and see how you help people. The second part of your job is to help people who are entrepreneurs or just working in general?
I work with high achieving women of all different career paths. So some entrepreneurs, I work with women who are in healthcare or who work in corporate and lots of different really exciting settings that
Yeah.
they love. Yeah.
Yeah. And you help with kind of um I remember talking on Clubhouse about making your schedule along with your cycle so that you can be your best at each point. So what is kind of a general idea of that? Do you recommend that somebody goes through and collects all that data and then like kind of figures out when they have the most energy and stuff, or like what is a basic kind of overview of that?
It really depends. Some of my clients do that and some don't. So it really depends on what your needs are and what your personal lifestyle is like. Um, so for example, since you are an entrepreneur, that may look like batching as many podcast interviews as possible during your follicular or ovulatory phase, when oxytocin is higher and dopamine and serotonin are higher. So, oxytocin is a bonding hormone. It helps you feel very social, it helps build social trust. Serotonin really helps with mood, of course, helping you feel happier. Dopamine helps you feel more motivated. So it might be that you are doing most of your interviews during this part of your cycle, whereas maybe during the luteal phase, when your brain tends to get more detail oriented, when we have hopefully have GABA rising, helping with focus, that might be the time that you edit. That might be the time that you start brainstorming for the next cycle. And so you might batch some of your work according to the habits of your cycle if that is something that for your schedule and your career path you have the liberty to do. And then I have some clients, for example, especially my clients who work in healthcare, their schedule is their schedule. They can't really change what they do or don't do according to their cycle. And so in that case, we're looking at outside of, your workload is your workload, your patients are your patients. How do we meet your needs so that you're able to show up as your best self? And so that could be working on stress management and nervous system regulation outside of work, especially for my healthcare workers who may be dealing with really hard cases or really high stress situations, doing things so that they're able to truly unplug from work, truly able to get the recovery that they need so they can show up the next day. A lot of times for both parties, both career paths, there are nutritional strategies involved and different things like that.
Yeah. So if somebody is like feeling low energy through their whole cycle, would you say that that could be something related to that, or that it's probably an external issue? Well, not external, it's an issue like not related to your cycle.
It really depends. I would ask about their stress levels. I get a lot of
Mhm.
clients who experience burnout. I get a
Mhm.
lot of clients who come to me either when they're on the brink of burnout or they are in a state of burnout. And so then I'm looking at, okay, before you started feeling exhausted all the time, how are you feeling? And for a lot of them, they were like, oh, I mean, I was dealing with stressful things, but I was getting all of this work done. And what is really interesting about this is a lot of women, before they hit that point of exhaustion all the time, were essentially living in fight or flight mode constantly. And for some of them, it actually felt really good because they were running on stress hormones that were keeping them going, that were keeping them busy and hustling and productive because they felt like they couldn't sit still. And honestly, for most of them, that earned them a lot of praise and a lot of money and achievement and got them raises and promotions and felt really, really good until it didn't. And in that case, it's absolutely related to their hormones, but it's also from their environment, from sometimes their upbringing or the pressures that society has on them. And then it's a matter of learning how to balance those stress hormones again, regulate their nervous system, and get them in a space where they can feel better without just repeating that same cycle over and over and over again.
Yeah. I feel like maybe I'm doing that. I feel like I'm kind of running, 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 and then burning out, and then taking a day or 2, and then going, 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 and I definitely have
Yeah.
to address my own issues, but, um
That's so common though, and I really appreciate you saying that because I think that is the majority of us. And we all have confirmation bias. So we're making decisions about our current behavior as well as what we think is going to happen in the future based on what's happened in the past. And most of us didn't grow up with great examples of how do we both really take care of our health and still have a career, take care of our family, that kind of things, especially women. What is that term like? Mother martyr. So a lot of us have only been shown examples of, especially women who
Mhm.
run themselves down. And so we don't have confirmation or proof that we can do something differently and still be good enough, still be successful, still